Hey everyone, it's Matt Scott, and this is 180 Degrees of Impact, and I am here with Tim Yoon. Tim, how's it going?
Hello. It's going great. How are you, man?
Good. I'm doing really well, and I'm happy to have you here to definitely discuss your impact and discuss your journey. Because I know you as part of National Day of Civic Hacking, as part of
Mhm.
last year's White House Open Data Innovation Summit, where, of course, the U.S. Chief Technology Officer shouted you out, which I'm guessing was a cool moment. I thought it was very cool for
It
you.
was pretty cool, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about your journey to understand um, the impact that you're making in the world, which I'm hoping you could share more about on this call. So,
Uh,
could you just tell me and tell the 180 Degrees of Impact audience more about who you are and what you're up to?
yeah, no problem. So my name is Tim Yoon. I'm from Northern California. Currently, I'm going to be a MBA student at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University. Prior to that, though, I was a consultant at Accenture, working in their Health and Public Services division. And like you've been alluding to, some of the things that I've been doing on the side have also been working in the civic tech space, specifically with Code for Sacramento and the Sacramento Food Bank.
Awesome. So you mentioned your work with Accenture, and of course, I did speak about your work with the Sacramento Food Bank. But could you tell me a little bit more about how it all ties together? Because I also know on top of that that you're a Duke person, whatever they call those, and you're also a musician. Like
Yep.
how do you see all those pieces tying together, especially to feed into your work with the food bank?
Yeah. So for me, I tend to feel very blessed and privileged with a lot of the opportunities I've been provided. Um, and so whenever I approach anything, whether it's my professional or academic or just things I love to do as hobbies, I try to um, make the most of it, and try to ask myself the question of how can I use this to either help others or to connect with others. Um, the other thing is that I tend to get distracted and say, "Oh, that looks shiny too," and that's led to all sorts of different opportunities, such as the ones that we've already listed.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And I think it would be really helpful. I always love to hear about this when you do share. Could you tell me more about how we got to Oreo Swamp? Because I know there was progression. I know there's a story about the funny name, I would say. So could
Yep.
you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no problem. So just for context for the viewers, Team Oreo Swamp is the team name that I was a part of during the National Day of Civic Hacking in the Sacramento, California division last June. Um, and so some personal background for myself. So I went to a Duke undergrad, and there I was an economics and public policy double major. And I did still have a tech bent. I worked for the IT department there. I actually interned for Code for America during that time, back in its early stages. And so I was always kind of on the lookout for, hey, what are some ways to just get involved with community? What are some ways to make an impact? So during college, I was involved with basically a food nutrition program that I helped start up with a couple other classmates at a local middle school. And so that kind of was my first foray into um, this world of food and nutrition and really helping people with those sorts of ideas. And so that kind of took a back seat when I graduated, and I joined Accenture because I wanted to join a company that was involved not only on the consulting side, but on the tech side as well. And it seemed like a nice fit. And it worked out even better because I ended up being in the government and public health services division. Um, and so kind of with that background, that brought us to about a year ago, when the National Day of Civic Hacking happened. And because I had known about Code for America during my college days, I knew that they had a group called Code for Sacramento as a branch in that area. And so I saw on Facebook that they had a National Day of Civic Hacking coming up. So when I decided to go and wake up on a Saturday morning, they happened to have someone from the California Department of Health, Jackie Richardson, who was talking about food insecurity in Sacramento. And because of my prior experience during college, I thought, oh, this seems more interesting. Um, and so one of the topics that she had brought up was this idea of food swamp. So in college, I had learned about this idea of food deserts, where in certain areas of different neighborhoods, you may find that there's no access to really healthy, affordable food. Um, but then Jackie brought up this new term of food swamps, where in addition to not having access to healthy food, there's also a plethora of unhealthy food in that area too. So there are a few others of us, complete strangers, who are also interested in food insecurity. We decided, hey, why don't we team up together to maybe come up with a project idea? And while we were doing this, we were sitting around a table that had Oreos on them as snacks. And so just kind of as a joke, we were like, hey, why don't we call ourselves Team Oreo Swamp? Because we seems to fit. There's some irony about eating Oreos while talking about food insecurity here. So that's kind of how our team came together, kind of random group of people. That's how the team name came. And then it was just an incredible journey starting from that point.
Awesome. And the rest is history.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me that you chose to focus specifically on food and nutrition, but I'm curious going back. I know you mentioned your experience with an exposure to those food issues and public health. Where did that interest even come from initially? Was it coincidence, or was there something that you previously learned or saw that drew you and bound you to the issue?
Right. So part of it was coincidence. During college, we called that program that I was talking about Food for Thought. Part of the reason why that came up was because one of our classmates had previously been working with that middle school. And in North Carolina, unfortunately, childhood obesity is unfortunately an issue that's going on. And so it just happened to be one of those things where we knew about the different issues that North Carolina children are facing, and that we had a connection with not only the middle school, but we also happened to make a connection with the Department of Health and locally. And we knew that was also an issue that they were interested in. So it's not necessarily that I had this innate drive to work in that issue. It was more of, hey, I'm just looking in general for ways to help or different ideas or topics. This seems to be one at the moment right now. Especially at that time, Michelle Obama was very big about healthy eating as well. And so a lot of things kind of worked together for us to really take a look at that issue at the time.
Yeah, there's definitely a ton of angles to address when it comes to under and over nutrition. I'm especially curious, like, since you've gotten involved with your hack from National Day of Civic Hacking, or with your project, and with this area overall, are there any statistics, facts, or like big surprising realizations you've had that you think like maybe someone like me doesn't know about food nutrition and the issues?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear some of those, definitely.
So it depends on the area, right? So if we're going to take it from California to the Sacramento side, I think one of the things that had been shared with us from Jackie was how 16.6% of the Sacramento County population was considered food insecure. And so the state average is about 14%. And so to know that 240,000 people who lived all just right around me in Sacramento were considered food insecure, that definitely was very eye-opening for me. So that's an example, one of the statistics where I was like, oh, this is could be substantial.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible, because I think sometimes, I'll say from my perspective, it's so hard to see what's beyond your worldview, or what's right. Beyond your day to day. Like when you're walking down the street, you only see so much, and you might even encounter things like, living in Washington D.C., I encounter homelessness, for instance, but I really don't learn the realities by seeing that or witnessing it. So I think it's so powerful that you share that, because like for me, 240,000 people obviously is ton of people, and then you think like beyond the state, you think in the US or globally, it's such a huge issue. So it's really amazing that you're addressing that. What on another related note, I'm curious, what drew you to um, well to make an impact or to spend your time, I'll say spend your time doing something that helps people rather than spending some time just focusing on tech or as I mentioned earlier, focusing on making music, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I think part of it is motivated. I'm Christian, and I'm a big proponent of using my faith through actions. So I don't think it's enough to just to say, "Oh yeah, we love you and good luck." Like I want my actions to actually mean something and to actually have an impact, where it's not just empty words. And I think that's been, I've been very fortunate to have a family that I think exemplified that very well. And so that's also something that I wanted to do through whatever I happen to do it to. Um, and so I think it just made sense for me, um, especially when I first found out that there was such a thing like Code for America or the Civic Tech Space, or to do those sorts of things. Um, and I think when I realized that that I personally could do something, even just a little part, um, I think that definitely motivated me to look at different opportunities. So even with my experience with Accenture, I was very fortunate because I got to be involved in not just a small scale, but a very large scale IT implementations that like millions of Californians, and like the healthcare space. Um, and because I got to see a lot of the behind the scenes, all the hard work and design and kind of front end work that it takes to get to that point. And the fact that I can actually be realistic, that definitely helped make the idea of like helping the world and making an impact. It made it a lot more realistic and less daunting or scary, or out of reach. So once I knew that it was something I was able to do, I said, yeah, let's find those opportunities and go for it.
Yeah, I think it's really surprising for me because even looking back to last 2016, like that was my first time attending and even being part of National Day, and it wasn't as a participant. It was more in the role of the storytelling and
Right.
the word out. But it was so interesting because I couldn't have told you what would happen out of that National Day of Civic Hacking. Sure,
Right.
in DC here we had Megan Smith and Kristen Honey from the White House Office of Presidential Correspondence involved. But a few months later, there was the White House Open Data Innovation Summit, and you were one of the people who was basically specifically called out and honored for your work. So I really want to know, while I know you weren't in it for the recognition, how did that feel and what was that experience like?
Oh man. um, it was pretty surreal. um, so I just to provide some context, I love reading, and I had actually read a book from Anish Chopra, who was a former US CTO, who was also in the audience at the time, like well before any of this National Day of Civic Hacking or any of this stuff had happened, just because I thought it was such a cool way to be involved today in public service, by using tech. And so to actually, be in a panel at White House Open Data Innovation Summit with Anish Chopra and the other CTOs right in front of me, to have a quick quip and dialogue with him. Yeah, it was an honor and privilege. But it was, I think it definitely, like one, I was just very thankful to even be in that space with like yourself and so many other incredible individuals. But two, I think it was just also more encouragement, and more solidification that yeah, these are the sorts of things that I want to do with my life. These are the sorts of opportunities. These are the sorts of people that I want to be around. Like this is a movement that's well worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel very similarly about that experience. And about the movement, and I always think, like, how do we get more people involved in the civic tech space? Because there are so many people with the skills, and there are so many people with the passion, and there's that rare moment where there are people like you and others who are involved in national day of civic hacking or get involved in the civic hacking space, who actually combine those two sides of the coin to make something awesome and impactful. So, I'm curious, from your experience, how do you think we get more people to focus on making an impact with their time, one way or the other?
Yeah, and it's funny because I'll tell coworkers, you know, hey, by the way, I'm doing this thing, or hey, would you want to go? And a lot of them have been like, yeah. And so I brought people to Code for Sacramento events. They'd be like, oh, I like, this is awesome. Like, I never knew about this. And I think that's usually the common theme that I hear. Like, I never knew that this was possible. Because I think, relatively speaking, the civic tech space is somewhat new, right? I mean, we've had innovators during the last 10, 15 years, but it hasn't really been a national conversation. And I know folks like yourself, or Go for America, or other groups are really trying to push hard to spread that message. But by and large, the majority of people that I meet, whether in the tech space or whether in the public space, haven't really heard much about it.
Yeah.
And so I have seen some movement, at least within my previous employer, Accenture, where they finally start to see that, oh, hey, there's this side of things. And I've seen some partnerships start to form, or they're like doing some joint talks and conferences. And I know that's been one way to kind of spread the word. So like my boss, for example, was like, oh, hey, like I see like this Code for America is at the same thing that Accenture is at. Like, weren't you involved in that? I was like, yes, that's exactly what it is. I think the other thing too is that like whether it's Accenture or other groups, I think a lot of people already are in the civic tech space. They just don't realize, or they don't realize it's called that. Or that because, a lot of what's been pushed, I think, from the civic tech space has been more of a startup mentality. And so for folks who are more into like large scale IT implementation side of things, they don't call it that, right? They just know it as government work or public services work. And so I think seeing leadership being able to push more of that message and say, hey, this is part of a larger movement, right? We are working professionally in a large scale sense, but there's also these small time opportunities as well. I think once people know that they can actually do that this is actually a thing, I've seen people ecstatic, people saying, how can we help? And so definitely having more of those professional network opportunities being spread, I think, is one avenue to do so.
Yeah, and I think that's an awesome piece of advice for people who want to engage and get involved. And I'm curious if you have any other advice, especially for people who aren't involved. Maybe they're not in the civic tech space yet. What's that advice that you have to encourage people to engage?
Yeah, so I'm going to divide this out into the techies and the non-techies. Right. So for the techies, I think it's actually pretty easy because most of the techies that I've seen, they're itching to use their skills for something. So I think it's just a matter of, when I've seen the topics come up in like Hacker News or like on Reddit subforums or just other sorts of tech venues, I see a lot of enthusiasm, right? And so providing the messaging of like, hey, like check out your local Code for America brigade, right? And like check out their GitHub repo and like those sorts of opportunities. Like I know in Code for Sacramento, like folks like Joel and Maya, like they've been doing a great job of trying to bring in more folks in. So for the tech folks, I think it's like learn, like your skills are very much needed, very much immediately clickable. But the advice I would give is listen because I know there's a lot of clamor like, all right, let's jump in. But if you're trying to create the coolest app or coolest idea, but like no one's there to use it or no one knows to use it, and there's no relationship or connection, or it's not actually addressing an immediate like local civic need. I think I've seen it kind of lead to disillusionment and like being like, oh, I thought this was a cool space, but no one wants to use it, right? And so I would say definitely like seek out some of the people who are maybe non-techies who are already in this space and just listen to the things that they're using, or they're not using and they could use help on, right?
Yeah.
For the non-techies out there who want to get involved in this space, I would say it's okay not to be techie. I think, I mean, like everyone in Team Oreo Swamp wouldn't really consider ourselves techies, right? Like one or two of us out of the five of us were, like one was a JavaScript developer, one was a data analyst, but like the rest of us, like one works in finance, the finance side of things, right? Another is like more of a policy wonk. Myself, I work more with data, but it's surprising how easy it can actually be to still get plugged in, to still say, hey, this nonprofit or this government group, we can listen to you. We know you got this issue. We can get you this already built tool, already built tech application that I don't have to code personally, but I can connect you to, because I know that this can help you solve this. And you can help facilitate that connection, right? I think that is a way where you don't have to have your own personal tech experiences yourself, but you can still get involved with the movement. You can partner with the techie folks to really combine forces to really make an impact in local areas.
Yeah, and I think one lesson I'm learning from listening to you is that sometimes, like, for one, it's as simple as showing up and trying, but also you're working with government, you're working with citizens who have a need, and sometimes it's just as simple as just knowing that the worst that someone could say is like, no thanks,
Yeah.
But it's also really inspirational and awesome to see that you've tried and that you've accomplished things because you've actually gone beyond the idea phase to actually doing something, which I think is pretty cool.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
No problem. I do have one final question for you, because you've done so many things. You told us about a lot of your experiences, but I'm curious if your life story years from now were made into a book, whether that's a book that you're writing or it could even be a documentary, whatever it is, what would the title of that be?
Yeah. So at first I thought this was going to be a difficult question to think of. But it actually came to me pretty quickly. So I would say I would call my book title "This Little Light of Mine." Wow. And so if you're familiar with the title, it's the name of a song, right? It was written in the 1900s. It was I love the songs for a lot of different reasons. One, it was a childhood song growing up. That was just kind of fun. But I think the more I learned about the song and what it means, like the fact that it was used in the civil rights movements in the 1960s as a rallying cry. I've had the opportunity to sing that song in open mics in Sacramento with folks. The song is about saying, hey, we have a short time on earth. Let's make the most of it. Let's use our lives for love. Let's use it to make the people around us better. And regardless of what it is, right? Whether it's working, with Code for Sacramento, or going to, working with the food bank and doing those sorts of things. Or for me, like kind of what you've been related to, using music. One of the things that I've been very blessed to have done, even actually in the past few weeks, we've been talking about traveling and those sorts of opportunities. So I know a nonprofit group that works with anti-human trafficking. Recently I actually had the opportunity to go meet the nonprofit, but not only the staff workers, but for the kids who have been rescued. And I was very blessed to have the opportunity to actually play music for them. And it was just a very surreal experience to be able to play music for folks, and then afterwards see all the kids like try to imitate like the music that was going on. To be able to play music with some of the kids too, and just see them light up. Um, like they are some extraordinarily skilled, very yeah. It was one of those things where, like, as much as I might have been able to help inspire them, they've inspired me too. It was just another reminder of like whatever skills that I got, like use them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, even going forward, I would say, like, I think that's one of the big things for me, right? Whatever I got, use it to shine just a little bit more. And if I could find some other folks to shine along with, then all the more the merrier. So.
Yeah, and wow, that was really, really powerful. And I think, one thing that's so interesting is that when you said that, and I don't know if you thought this when you thought of what that title would be, but I think, for me, and I'm sure for people who are watching or for others who know you, it's really evident. Like, you see that passion shine through, that love shine through, that light shining through, which, it is just a testament to how much you believe in what you're doing. And I think that's another powerful piece of your story. Just that, like, sure, you're doing this thing like here, but like it has a broader impact and shines beyond that. So thanks a lot, Tim. I definitely have to thank you for joining me and for sharing your
Thank you,
story.
man.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly powerful. And for anyone who's watching, if you want to learn more about Tim, well, I would say to look him up. Tim, where could we find you on the internet?
Oh yeah. So I'm on Twitterverse. I'm on the YouTubeverse. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Tim Yoon. If you're looking for my Twitter handle, so my Twitter is Tim Timed In. And then on YouTube, if you just look up Tim Yoon, then you can find me as well for my music and other random escapades.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. And if you want to learn more about 180 Degrees of Impact, which I'm assuming you already know about because you found this video, it is www.lets.care, or just growing those social media platforms at Let's You Care on Twitter. So Tim, make sure to follow if you haven't already. And Facebook, facebook.com/Let's You Care. So thanks again, Tim, and thanks everyone for joining us. And until next time, keep impacting.